Ethics and Consent, a Personal Framework by Ryan Hicks. Scene, internal, a garage. Ryan Hicks, 41 years old, is sitting on a bare metal stool, reading from loose papers on a clipboard. Behind him are makeshift shelves, artwork, and spray-painted buckets. He's dressed unironically in a suit jacket and slacks with a fedora on his head and pink shoes made from eucalyptus pulp on his feet. He takes a swig from a bottle. It's a fifth of Jack Daniels, but full of clear liquid. Don't worry, he says, it's just water. Ryan is coming to the conclusion of his ethics class, reading through his personal moral framework paper. He's thought a lot about rightness and wrongness in the past, but the last few months have given him some extra language and structure with which to solidify the principles he'd like to live by. If we're learning about business management and leadership in this program, we need to pin some philosophy back by the ears, or even our best intentions are going to make bad situations worse. Do you default on the easy and unscrupulous, or do you find a moral compass with a decent measure of true north? Like it or not, you will be judged eventually. Introduction. The concept of ethics is a prickly topic because by philosophical standards, you can't appeal to authority. You can't give unconditional responsibility of your morals to a person or a book or a cultural norm. You have to think for yourself and within yourself about everyone else. Ethics don't exist in a vacuum. Ethics exist in the space between you and other feeling individuals. And the structure of your logic should be how to do the right thing at the right time with limited resources and limited experience or insight. It would be easy to be ethical if you had focused telepathic ability like in a superhero movie. What is this other person thinking and feeling? And what is the common ground between me and them? But then to expand that telepathic ability outward to groups, to cultures, to past thoughts and experiences, and then stretch it into the future. It's a tall order to consistently behave ethically because individual and group desires, predictions, and values can often be insensible, driven by hormones, trauma, and wishful thinking as to how the world works both within an arm's reach and on the other side of the world. Life is messy, existence is messy, cohabitation is messy. Common, universal codes of ethics between individuals and within the framework of business practices could smooth out human interactions on familial, local, and global scales. But the thing about ethics is that they are really, really, really hard to actively follow. Even the one ethical principle that governs them all, do no harm. Do no harm. It takes more than a lifetime to understand and master, and requires the unlearning of generational stresses and distresses that effectively began at the beginning of the human plotline. Short-term, greedy decisions that rely on power dynamics, preset resource allocations, status quo sycophants, monopolistic violence, and appeals to unseen or unknowable forces are normal and normalized because they're easy defaults and they keep things the same for people in positions of privilege. The birth lottery is real and omnipresent. True universal ethics would reset the luck factor to 0 for every newborn child. In 2021, it's estimated that 4 children were born every second. Give them all equal opportunity by wiping out the bloodline advantages that come with time and space. Pool the collective resources of the earth and distribute them equally. Distribute them ethically. Imagine how well royal families and political oligarchs would receive that mandate. We all know what happens when activists start operating under the banner of purge the elites. Ego divides the human experience, and ethics brings the pieces back together. Ego says, I'm better because I'm different and I can cheat to win. Then ethics will say, we're all in this together and it's not a competition. There is an unfortunate manipulation of the second idea in the corporate world. How often do you see the subtext of a business mantra? My company or product is the one you should choose because it's competitively better at promoting that we're all in this together. All this considered, Learning about ethics through the categories of utilitarianism, rights and duties, and justice and fairness can help give structure to ethical discussions about past decisions, present questions, and predictions about the future. Beyond those definitions, I'd also like to add the idea of consent to my personal framework, so we'll see how that fits in shortly. My sources of derived ethics. Brief definitions. Utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Biggest pro, difficult decisions can be brought into focus using concrete math and numbers. Biggest con, without some care, immoral or harmful decisions can and will be used to bring about arguably moral final results, and the pain inflicted on others can be justified after the fact. Rights and duties. Every moral freedom comes with a moral responsibility. To get, you must give. Or the reverse. You get something first, and your moral obligation is to give in return. There's a very clear sense of reciprocity, regardless of power dynamic, and behavior in a complementary way now supersedes focusing on long-term utility. Biggest pro, immediacy and consistency, and the leveling of social discrepancies and mismatches. Biggest con, understanding which rights and duties or claims and responsibilities are connected can be difficult. There are simple pairs. My right to not be randomly killed means it's my duty to not randomly kill other people. Then there are more complicated ones. My right to bodily autonomy means it's my duty to respect the bodily autonomy of others. But then, what if I have some other belief that doesn't like, prioritize, or even allow the bodily autonomy of others? Can I reconcile that? Do I have to give up some of my bodily autonomy so I feel ethical about forcing others to do the same? Which part of my autonomy matches theirs? Can I ignore specific parts of my rights and duties ethical compass if it doesn't match with my core identity? Justice and fairness. Like goes with like. One easy rule to follow when it's time to do a major house cleaning is to gather things using the mantra like goes with like. Similar things go in similar places. Put the kitchen stuff together, the seasonal stuff together, the tools together. It's an efficient way of organizing thoughtfully. It's the same with justice and fairness. Similar people in similar circumstances should be grouped and treated similarly without bias. A person is a person regardless of class, creed, demographic, financial situation, religion, or personality. Two people who perform similar actions in similar situations deserve fair treatment in context that involves considering both equality and equity. Loyalty and preference, conscious or otherwise, unfortunately, create a huge wrinkle in the ethics of justice and fairness because social and professional nepotism are expected and even encouraged in many situations. Biggest pro, blind consistency is hard to argue against. Biggest con, any kind of nuance or dissimilarity in closely associated circumstances can make accurate social, contractual, or judicial comparisons very difficult, if not impossible. Influences on the present. I'd like to focus on the rights and duties and justice and fairness lenses to establish my personal ethical framework. I'm going to set aside utilitarianism for a rainy day. I'll bring in Weinstein's 5 ethical principles in 12 words. Do no harm. Make things better. Respect others. Be fair. Be loving. And mix them with Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements in 16 words. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And Brené Brown's Braving acronym, outlining the elements of trust in 7 words with a few extra descriptions for clarity. Boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault. Don't share information that's not yours to share. Integrity, courage over comfort. Non-judgment, generosity, the benefit of the doubt. And make an overlay with the Buddhist 4 Noble Truths in 40 words. All life is suffering. The cause of suffering is desire. To escape from suffering, free yourself from desire. To free yourself from desire, follow the Eightfold Path, which is essentially a personal moral framework with some wisdom and active thoughtfulness involved. Right speech, action, livelihood. Right understanding and intention. Right effort, mindfulness, and concentration. And a variation of a prayer for the release of suffering in 76 words. May all who suffer be freed from their pain. May all who are frightened be released from their fear. May all who are trapped feel themselves newly without bindings. May all without power discover choice. And may all separated souls willfully recognize connection to a single source. May those who find themselves without guidance, the inexperienced, the uncertain, the unprotected, be guarded by benevolent love and quickly know peace where before they did not seek it. And the simple, serene statement by Ram Dass, 7 words, we're all just walking each other home. That's a total of 158 words. It takes about 1.5 minutes to recite them. And inside those words are the principles of rights and duties and fairness and justice. Utilitarianism, probably less so. Now, if I have to make a decision, especially one that seems difficult, working through those 158 words will give me firm ground to stand on. Or imagine if those 158 words were recited at the beginning of each school day around the world, or before business meetings, or before negotiations, or before criminal trials, or before political debates. Imagine that those words form the basis of an ethical common ground, and note that there is very, very clearly no appeal to any authority. Every part of that 158-word set contains actionable, personal perspectives that do not require anyone else to submit to you or what you believe in. Every part of that moral code is about release, relief, inclusion, and empathy. As a human, as a manager, as a business owner, as a companion, a partner, a spouse, a parent, a guardian, a teacher, as a leader, what do you need to know or understand outside of those 158 words? Now, I'd like to add a final idea that isn't sourced from classic or formal writings, but one that I've stitched together from social media anecdotes that I've been gathering specifically from the last year. And the topic is consent. Most of the content I've watched is unscripted, and it's about consent in relationships, but the ideas that the creators are pursuing have deep implications in the broader application of ethics as well. Here's a list of what consent can mean. Consent is an agreement between people to do something specific and well-defined. Consent only happens when everyone understands the nature of the activity and all of the risks and potential consequences. If a person doesn't have the capacity to understand risks and consequences for an action, they can't consent. Capacity factors include age, physical or emotional intelligence or development, and any level of intoxication or mental or physical deprivation. Consent is free and voluntary. There is no cost, price, or charge on either side of a consensual agreement. Consent is revocable at any point for any reason, unless it is given irrevocably as part of a freely agreed contract. Consent is not present if obtained through force, coercion, implicit or explicit threats, or through the presentation of misinformation or disinformation. Consent is not present if a person is unable to communicate unwillingness. In other words, a lack of disagreement does not equal agreement. Neutrality or silence means no. So how do these ideas of consent mix with the ethical frameworks stated earlier? Well, there are personal and professional instances that will require you to make decisions that act upon people. To determine if your decisions are ethical beyond some of the abstract ways of thinking of morality, think from the perspectives of the people being affected by your choices. So you may have checked all of the boxes within your lived experience of what's right or wrong, harmful or beneficial. But is there official and legitimate consent coming from every single person involved regarding the short and long-term consequences of your choices? To answer this, you'd have to dive deeply into a staggering amount of information. It's no longer a case of majority rule, and you have to ask the hard question, why do you not consent? And then you have to listen to the answer. And this train of thought isn't about legality, it's about ethics. Consider in a moral discussion people giving statements like these. I don't consent to paying taxes. I don't consent to being locked up in prison. I don't consent to having to hear my neighbor mowing the lawn at 3 in the morning when I'm sleeping. I don't consent to my rent being raised. I don't consent to being fired from my job. What if, ethically, you had to consider all of this non-consent and listen to the reasoning and then give every party involved all of the true and accurate information regarding your decision? How absolutely wild would it be to explain to people that they are negatively impacted by your decisions because, as people, they are inconveniences in your pathway to personal success, to your profit margins, to your personal validation, to the order you were given. They are obstacles between you and your private potential or your key performance indicators. Very curious stuff. In a position of power or responsibility, you often don't need the consent of the affected because there are systems in place that make that consent a legal non-factor. That's some really uncomfortable psychological territory to consider. Practical application in my current workplace. I think developing this personal ethical framework now will have less impact on my current job than it will have on what I do next. In the company I work for, the founder, along with my boss, make the hard decisions about all things profit related, the core and the heart of any business venture. It's my job to keep clients satisfied and informed through individual conversations and communication, and then through media output like videos, tutorials, and posts. And if I say it once, I say it 10 times per day. I don't sell anything, I just tell stories. My company offers a service, software that provides a technological function. It takes up no space, it's made entirely from computer code. So my ethical decisions are all about relationships, connections between what potential clients want and what we can provide. I reconcile expectations and pricing tiers, and it's pretty straightforward. But what comes next after this job? Where can I insert myself into the business world where my views on ethics throw some elbows into some ribs, where my personal framework has a function outside of my person? Or is that even something I want to do? What if I want to keep it to myself? Could I be a possessive ethicist? Or what if I want to share it with the world? I could give it away for free in snippets over webs of virtual space or hide it behind a paywall. That's a thing, right? Asking for money in exchange for energy spent? Ethically requesting money in exchange for ethical energy spent, right? With the ethical creation and ethical distribution of an ethical product. That's what we're getting at. That's what this framework is for. That's what the 158 words get you to. So while I'm experimenting with this framework, you can consider those 158 words yourself. Alter them as need be, and see if you come out a better person on the other end.